Welcome to free audiobooks from Ngân hàng Easy Book Review channel from our Pham. Hope you enjoy all these novels. If you love any books, you can support author by like, share or donate. Thank you.
Fiction novel, audiobook, Egypt, The Temptation of the Dream Part 3. The whole space seemed to grow heavier, a strange cold aura spreading, filling the entire chamber. For a moment, everyone else stood frozen. One person screamed, It's moving. Oh my God, the statue is moving. Another person threw down their toolkit, the notes of the archaeologists crashing to the ground, and turned to flee, trailing a series of frantic screams. Run. There's a demon. A real demon. Ancient artifacts were trampled, equipment scattered across the floor, and the sound of hurried footsteps echoed continuously. Some people, still outside, had no idea what was happening. They continued their work, carrying antiquity, while a few others remained engrossed in photographing the hieroglyphs on the stone walls. They didn't know, inside the chamber, Anubis had truly awakened. And he was not the last one. Jean, the man who had uncovered the ancient treasure for the Egyptian state, had no idea. He had no idea that the recurring dreams over the years, with their vague calls and images of pyramids, were not omens of good fortune, nor were they a sign of some benevolent fate leading him to a precious treasure. They were simply a trap, a seductive invitation, a masterfully crafted hook, drawing him closer, closer still, until the price to pay left no escape. Jean thought he was here merely to search for something. He believed he was the one to bring the light, to bring knowledge from the darkness into the light, or simply to seek a reward. But what he didn't know was that what awaited him here wasn't a material treasure, but him. His soul itself was the true treasure. When Jean stood there in the hotel room, about to leave for home, his heart full of regret over the paltry reward from the Cairo government until, without thinking, he reached out and touched one of the dog-headed statues. Just a light touch, but enough to awaken the nightmare. In that moment, Jean triggered something beyond human understanding. A chill swept through his flesh, penetrating to his very spine. His legs went numb, his body frozen as if trapped in an invisible prison. And then the statue began to tremble slightly. Only he saw it. Only he felt it. Something ancient was waking up. Jean didn't know. He had no idea that by touching it, he had offered his soul as a voluntary offering. When the eyes of Anubis opened, the golden glow of the statue reflecting in the harsh neon lights, it was already too late. Jean only had time to scream in desperation. Damn it! Run! The scream startled everyone around. But at that very moment, Jean's soul was already being pulled out, bit by bit, like faint smoke rising from a dying flame. They saw his body collapse to the ground. And they saw Anubis slowly devour his soul like an ancient sacrificial offering. As he fell, that was when the others finally realized something was terribly wrong. Panic erupted. Some screamed. Others dropped their tools and fled. But Jean no longer had a chance. When his soul vanished from this world, the true nightmare had only just begun. The moment Jean touched the jackal-headed statue, he had unknowingly awakened a force that should have remained forever buried beneath Egypt's sands, the guardians of the underworld, sealed in stone in the form of Anubis statues. But they were not the benevolent gods of death that ancient humans once believed in. No. That image was merely a disguise, a mask hiding a far more terrifying truth. They were the servants, the loyal soldiers of a supernatural evil, a being that once brought catastrophe upon the ancient world and had been sealed away by the true gods. Jean didn't know. He had absolutely no idea that in countless past lives, he had once been a saint, a servant of God. And that legacy made his soul immensely valuable. Through many incarnations, including his current one, all those sacred memories had been wiped clean. Yet the divine light within his soul remained untouched, powerful, a gift from God that endured. Those who serve God, who are set apart as holy, are marked with that divine gift. And even after countless lifetimes, no matter the sins committed in each one, the light remains as a sign, a record of merit, to be rewarded when God returns. That soul, no matter how lost, would still be forgiven. It was precisely that light, that sacred power, which unintentionally became the key. The key to unlocking the ancient seals that had kept the evil entity imprisoned for millennia. And worse, that same light nourished them, restored their strength. And just like a moth lured to a flame, Jean had stepped into a perfect trap. A snare crafted from years of recurring dreams and mysterious callings, all designed to lure him in. All it took was a single touch, a fleeting moment, enough to trade away his soul. Jean didn't have time to escape. His soul was pulled out, crushed in the throat of the statue, and then swallowed whole. It had resurrected, fully awakened, its power now completely restored, thanks to the saintly soul of Jean. Yet this was only the beginning. There were still 11 other statues still dormant, each one a limb of the great evil entity, and they were merely sleeping, waiting to be awakened and fed. The demonic eyes of Anubis now glowed with a deep, bottomless black as they swept across the tiny humans screaming and fleeing from the pyramid's chamber. A guttural growl, like it had risen from the abyss of hell itself, rumbled from its throat. Then it moved. Fast. Incredibly fast. A man who was the last to flee, glancing back just once, was already within reach. Just a touch. That was all it took. His soul was instantly ripped from his body. A pale ivory light, trembling in despair, was swallowed into the creature's mouth in an instant. It devoured the soul whole, its eyes closing, as if savoring a luxurious meal. The man's body collapsed, his eyes vacant, his breath extinguished. No blood, no wound, just an empty shell, soulless. Another man screamed in terror and made a desperate dash for the exit, but he was a step too slow. Another touch, another soul torn from its vessel, another life fall down. The screams of fear echoed outward from the pyramid's depths. Anubis did not stop. The sound of pounding footsteps, people tripping and falling, wailing in terror, it burst from the ancient tunnel like a crashing wave. Dozens of people, archaeologists and local porters, rushed out of the tunnel entrance, faces contorted with panic. No one looked back. No one could speak a word. They only screamed mindlessly, as if pursued by some invisible terror. The guards stationed outside turned in confuse. One shouted, "What's going on? What the hell is happening in that there?" No one answered. Only desperate headshakes, wide, haunted eyes, and frantic feet pounding the sand. They ran as fast as they could. One guard gripped his rifle tightly. He glanced at his comrades. Then together, they charged into the pyramid tunnel. 3 or 4 local soldiers followed, sprinting toward the entrance. Boots thudded urgently against the sand. But before they could get far inside, they witnessed the unthinkable. From within the pyramid, a massive dark figure emerged, over 2 meters tall, its entire body inlaid with black and gold. It was as if the statue of the god Anubis had come to life. In its left hand, it held a crescent-shaped war spear, the golden blade glinting with the fierce sunlight. One soldier swallowed hard, lifting his rifle with trembling hands. He shouted, "What power is this? A false god? A demon? Drop your weapon. Surrender immediately." But the statue did not respond. It only raised its head, and in its eyes burned like the ashes of thousands of scorched souls. Chapter 10. Then it charged forward. Faster than a blink, it reached out and touched the nearest guard. The soldier, startled, pulled the trigger. The first shot rang out harshly. Die, monster, he shouted in his native tongue. The other soldiers immediately unlocked their weapons, unleashing a hail of bullets straight at the god statue. Gunfire roared. Bullets rained down like a storm. But it was useless. The bullets hit, bounced off, and fell to the ground like pebbles. Not a scratch. Not even a reaction. Then it touched him. That jet-black stone-like hand touched the first guard. A faint white light, the blurry silhouette of a human soul, was pulled out of his body. The soldier let out one final scream as his soul was completely torn away. It was devoured. His body collapsed, eyes wide open, lifeless. The remaining guards saw it all. They clearly saw something translucent like a soul being ripped out and swallowed before their very eyes. One soldier dropped his rifle, trembling. No way, this can't be real. That thing, it eats souls, souls are real. No one waited for an explanation. They fled, throwing away honor, weapons, orders. Those soldiers ran like madmen, joining the panicked crowd, mouths repeating in horror. It's not human, not a god. It's the demon. Those who had already escaped the pyramid site kept running, as if even a single pause would let the darkness swallow them whole. Behind them, the surviving guards also dropped their weapons, fleeing without ever looking back. The area around the pyramid had already been sealed off long ago. No tourists were present since the excavation began. Only a few archaeologists, technicians, and local laborers remained inside, transporting artifacts on carts. The chaos made the Anubis statue pause for a moment. It turned its head, observing the scattered souls running in every direction, making it difficult to pick the next target, the next meal. For a brief second, it stood still. Then it turned, randomly choosing a direction where a group of people were pushing and shoving to escape, and it charged like a black storm. Each step it took pounded the earth like the beat of a war drum. Dust and sand billowed behind it like an approaching storm. Inside it, the soul of Jean. Thanks to that, its true power had been partially restored, making the black and gold form of its body even more mysterious and sinister. But Jean was only one. A saint soul, full of energy, but not enough to fully awaken its ancient self. The other souls, the commoners, the soldiers, were too weak. Not enough. Still not enough. It needed more. It needed to devour more. Its eyeless gaze burned with a fierce hunger, a blackness deeper than the deepest abyss. It needed to absorb enough energy to awaken the remaining 11 guardians, immortal beings who had slumbered for millennia beneath the desert pyramid. And after that, to complete the final ritual, to awaken the imprisoned one, the ultimate evil force to whom it and the 11 guardians had once sworn allegiance. An ancient entity so old, humankind never even knew its name. And now, given the chance, the time of rebirth was drawing near. The group kept running frantically, the thunder of footsteps echoing through the ancient stone corridor, mixed with gasps and panicked cries. Some of them, even in their terrified frenzy, couldn't help but glance back, as if a dark force compelled them to do so. And they saw it. A pitch-black figure, unnaturally tall and massive, was rushing toward them like a sweeping storm. In its left hand, it wielded a crescent-shaped spear gleaming with a cold, deadly light. Each of its steps seemed to crack the earth behind it, staining the ground with the color of blood. "It's coming!" he screamed in terror, their voice breaking with fear. "It's coming this way!" A guard running just behind them, his face pale as paper but still managing to keep pace, glanced back and shouted, his voice like a command. "Move! Move fast if you don't want us all to die." Then, driven by a survival instinct, he suddenly veered off into a different narrow corridor, taking a different path and separating from the group. A few others quickly followed, hoping that splitting up might confuse the creature or slow it down. Far away, in the bustling modern cityscape, high-rise buildings with glass panels reflected the golden rays of the setting sun, standing close together like a forest of steel. On the balcony of a luxury hotel, a few foreign tourists were sipping wine, chatting casually. One of them turned to look down at the street, about to tell a funny story, but suddenly froze. "Hey, do you see that?" A middle-aged man pointed into the distance, toward the edge of the archaeological site, where tiny figures could be seen fleeing in all directions. "What's going on? Is that some kind of drill?" A woman beside him asked, frowning. "Doesn't look like it. They're running this way. Look like they're running from something." A younger man, seemingly a photographer, raised his camera and zoomed in, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "There's something black chasing after them, and it's huge and black." But the distance was too great. The shimmering desert light of dusk and the swirling dust kicked up by the fleeing crowd blurred the view. All they could see was a massive black figure moving at terrifying speed. A shadow that made hearts tremble, even though its details were impossible to make out. What is that? A tank? Some kind of beast? Or is it a terrorist attack? Wine glasses were quietly set down on the table. The air on the balcony suddenly turned heavy with tension and unease. Down below, a few residents also began to look forward at the approaching crowd. Some pulled out their phones to start recording. No one knew that a nightmare had just risen from the depths of the earth and was approaching with every step. The divine statue surged forward, its heavy footsteps thundering through the vast desert like war drums summoning lost souls. One porter at the rear tripped and fell. Before he could get back up, the shadow was already looming over him. "No! Please," he cried out in despair. The statue's left hand reached for him. "Just a moment." A stream of silvery white light was pulled straight from his body, floating in midair like a strand of soul smoke. Then it was devoured, swallowed whole into the statue's mouth like a light snack savored with disturbing delight. With each soul consumed, the statue paused for several seconds. The golden glow in its eyes intensified, and the black aura surrounding it thickened. No one dared to look back. Screams filled the air, footsteps thundered across the pavement. Desperate voices called out for friends, family. Some were knocked down, others abandoned their bags and luggage. Children were hoisted up, adults shoved past one another in sheer desperation. And still, the statue moved forward, unhurried, unrushed. But with every step, another life was devoured. It continued harvesting the souls of anyone too slow, too stunned, or too terrified to run. A mere touch, and their spirit was drawn out like mist, dissolving into its dark form. In the distance, archaeologists and security guards, those who had narrowly escaped earlier, frantically called authorities. Their desperate voices merged with the chaos. "It's alive! The statue of Anubis." But on the other end of the line, only skepticism. "What? What statue? What are you talking about? This isn't a joke. It's moving, it's killing people, ripping their souls out." At first, the authorities dismissed it as a sick prank or perhaps a mistake caused by work stress or mass panic. But then came the second call, the third, the 10th, and then dozens, hundreds of calls began flooding into relief centers and police stations from civilians. "Something is killing people near the pyramid. It looks like a walking statue, black and gold, like the god of death. We need the military. We need aircraft. Right now." Doubt began to spread among the officials. An emergency meeting was convened in less than half an hour. They summoned both the soldiers stationed near the pyramid and the archaeologists who had been present from the beginning for a full debriefing. A guard stood at attention, reporting to the entire leadership. "Sir, we witnessed it with our own eyes. The statue inside the pyramid, the one with the jackal head, suddenly moved. It stepped down from its pedestal. It came to life." The entire room fell silent. "We saw it touch a man, and then light emerged from the man's body, like his soul being pulled out." The man collapsed and didn't move again. We don't know if he's dead or still alive, but many others were devoured by it in the same way on the streets. One of the leaders frowned. Are you sure you weren't hallucinating? This sounds unbelievable. An archaeologist quickly interjected. No, it wasn't the hallucination. I saw it too. It's Anubis, the god who rules over the realm of the dead. At that point, even with hundreds of civilian calls coming in, the room was still filled with skepticism. No one wanted to believe that an ancient statue, thousands of years old, was truly walking around in broad daylight, stealing people's souls. However, the witnesses' terrified expressions, their trembling voices impossible to fake, and the grainy, distant footage now spreading across social media slowly sent chills down the spine of everyone in the room. While they still hesitated, unsure of what to believe, countless civilians in the city had already become soulless husks lying scattered on the streets. The statue had now fully entered the heart of Cairo. Before it stood a dense, chaotic, and terrified city. People ran in every direction, screaming, shoving, pushing each other in panic. But this chaos only made things easier, like prey flocking to the hunter. It marched forward slowly, as if nothing could stop it. With just a single touch, another soul was pulled out and vanished into its pitch-black mouth, silently merging with the body of the god statue. As it reached the city center, the Cairo Defense Forces arrived. Open fire. A thunderous volley exploded. AK rifles and machine guns roared across the district. Bullets rained down on the glistening black statue under the golden hue of the setting sun. But nothing happened, just like the futile attempt by the guards at the pyramid earlier. When the bullets hit the statue's body, they made a dry clang and then dropped to the ground. The bullet tips shattered, flattened as if they had struck some kind of divine metal no weapon could pierce. This can't be. A soldier gasped quick, eyes wide, still pulling the trigger, even though his gun was already out of ammo. The god statue continued moving, unfazed by the hail of bullets. It wasn't fast. It wasn't enraged. It didn't fight back, yet it seized its victims one by one, civilians and soldiers alike. Anyone who stood too close was effortlessly grabbed, their souls drained completely, their bodies falling down on the ground like discarded dolls. The captain of Cairo's defense unit immediately activated his communicator. We have engaged the target. Firepower is completely ineffective. I repeat, completely ineffective. We need new orders urgent. Meanwhile, at the command center, an emergency meeting was still underway following the distress call. Phones rang nonstop. Reports of panic and chaos overlapped. Then, the massive screen in the center of the room flickered to life, streaming live footage from aerial surveillance cameras. The image appeared. A towering black and gold statue walking through the panicked crowd. Soldiers fired continuously. Bullets rained down in relentless waves. But it remained completely unscathed. One official slammed his fist onto the table. Dear God, bullets can't even scratch it. Another official, his voice trembling, muttered. This isn't human technology. This thing, it's divine, something beyond the bounds of conventional science. A high-ranking leader gripped his phone tightly, his voice taut as a wire. Get an emergency connection to the Ministry of Defense. Initiate the highest-level contingency plan. We're facing something outside every known combat scenario. I told you, but you didn't believe me. The man's voice echoed through the meeting room like an icy slap. Chapter 12. As an archaeologist, his face was pale, his eyes weary, yet within them flickered a mix of anger and bitter resignation. He stared directly at the generals and officials, who remained silent, transfixed by the live broadcast of the horrifying scene unfolding outside. No one spoke. Only the intermittent beeping of the communication devices and the panicked cries over the phone lines filled the room. Without waiting for a response, he turned on his heel and strode out. The door swung open, then shut. He was gone, leaving behind the nation's most powerful figures, dazed, bewildered by the unfolding catastrophe. This was not war. It was something beyond their understanding. One of the senior leaders, a middle-aged man with graying hair and piercing eyes, slammed his fist onto the table. That thing is immune to bullets? Fine. Then we'll hit it with something stronger. He turned to the military officers. Deploy the tanks. Send in the gun planes. Prepare surface-to-surface missiles. Blast it as if it were a war machine. I refuse to believe that thing can withstand our full military force. Let's give it everything we've got. No one answered. Only the rustling of documents and the anxious glances exchanged across the room. He cast a brief look at the empty seat where the archaeologist had just been, dismissing his earlier warning entirely. It's not human, it's a god. He did not believe in gods. To him, anything could be destroyed if enough firepower was used, if enough force was applied. The gods hadn't saved the ancient Egyptians. Why would they be any different now? Outside, the archaeologist descended the stone steps. The late afternoon sun stretched his shadow long across the ground. He paused, gazing toward the city center, where the statue continued its slow, unhurried harvest of souls, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Shaking his head, his eyes darkened with a bitter realization. To challenge a god. The ancient Egyptians worshipped them. And now you think you can bring them down with guns and missiles? Hopeless. He let out a quiet, sorrowful sigh. A decision had already taken root in his heart. This land was no longer safe. He had to leave. Find a place where the gods had not yet awakened. A place where humans still understood just how small they truly were. In a single night, the god statue had devoured countless souls. The exact death toll remained unknown, but from fragmented video footage and scattered survivor accounts, estimates placed the number in the thousands. The city was in chaos. People fled in droves, abandoning their homes, their possessions, even their pets, clinging only to the desperate hope of survival. But not everyone was so lucky. Many who lagged behind, still struggling to comprehend what was happening, were caught and harvested. It was not until the following morning that the military finally assembled its full force. Tanks, artillery, fighter jets, missiles, everything was deployed to the city. But the statue was gone. It had returned to the pyramid, as silently as it had emerged. By the time the armed forces arrived, it stood once more upon its ancient pedestal, its eyes closed, its form still and dignified, as if it had never moved at all. The high-ranking officers stood frozen in shock at the sight. It's nowhere to be seen? Where did it go? Did we get it wrong? Some remained skeptical, fearing that it was merely hiding, waiting for the right moment. Immediately, they ordered a full-scale search of the area. Thermal scanners, radar, and seismic sensors were deployed. But no unusual signals were detected. Only one place remained unchecked, the ancient chamber deep within the pyramid. An officer hesitantly suggested, "Should we send troops inside to look?" No one answered. All eyes turned to the stone door leading into the depths of the pyramid, a place so dark and unknown that even Egyptian history had never unveiled its secrets. Despite having devoured thousands of souls, the god statue had yet to fully recover. No matter how numerous, the souls of ordinary humans could never compare to even a fragment of Jin's soul, the sacred soul bestowed by God. A saint's soul contained the power to restore divine strength at an ancient level, something that had once existed only in legends. It was a soul capable of reopening long-sealed doors, locked away for thousands of years, awakening forces that had been bound since the pyramids were still sites of sacrifice. The god statue had tasted a trace of Jin's soul, and now it could no longer be satisfied with mere human souls. It knew that out there, more sacred souls existed, hidden, dormant, undiscovered. And the true hunt, the hunt for saintly souls, was about to begin. A commanding officer deployed a camera-equipped robot into the depths of the pyramid. On the monitor, he saw countless ancient relics scattered across the cold stone floor, reflecting the flickering light of neon lamps. The robot moved forward. In the vast chamber, 11 statues stood motionless on stone pedestals, each bearing a different divine form. None of them moved. Even when the robot brushed against artifacts, no reaction came. They remained as lifeless stone figures, silent and inert. The officer frowned. A robot isn't human. Maybe it isn't enough to awaken that entity. He decided to send in an actual scout. Outside, armored vehicles stood ready for immediate response. He failed to notice something unusual. One of the statues still clutched a sickle in its hand, while all the other 11 carried no weapons. That was the very statue. But he overlooked this crucial detail. The scout entered the deep chamber, his steps cautious. The air was freezing, biting into his skin. The moment he crossed the sacred boundary, his human breath triggered the awakening of the ancient being. It sensed the presence of a living soul nearby. The statue's eyes snapped open. A deep, endless blackness emerged, consuming all light. It licked its lips slowly. Step by step, it descended from its golden pedestal. The scout froze. A chilling shiver ran down his spine. He had barely ventured further when he saw the statue approaching, slowly, calmly, like an inevitable death creeping toward him. Cold sweat poured down his face. Panic overtook him. He turned and ran for his life. Behind him, heavy footsteps echoed, step by step, drawing ever closer, like death itself, chasing him down. The scout had barely made it out of the stone chamber when his back was already drenched in sweat. His breath came in rapid, panicked gasps, as if he were on the verge of suffocation. His eyes were wide with terror as he pointed behind him. The commander barked, "Calm down. Speak." The soldier could only stammer, It woke up. It's coming." Immediately, every rifle outside was trained on the deep entrance beneath the pyramid, held steady by tense soldiers ready to fire at a moment's notice. Under the scorching Egyptian sun, where only sand and wind existed, the air was wound tight like a coiled spring. In the distance, tanks were already in position, their cannons raised, waiting for orders. Surveillance aircraft circled overhead, transmitting a live feed to the command center. A shadow began to emerge, a towering, 2-meter-tall statue, its body pitch black like ink. In its hand, it gripped a long spear, its tip a crescent blade so sharp it could sever even souls. Each step it took was heavy yet stately, moving with an unstoppable force. For a moment, the entire area fell silent. The commander narrowed his eyes at the figure, his voice low. "Let it come a little closer." The Anubis statue, the harbinger of the underworld, the guardian of souls in ancient Egyptian legend, advanced unhurriedly. It neither feared nor reacted to the soldiers' weapons or their encirclement. It moved as if performing a sacred ritual, one where it alone held absolute dominion. "Fire!" the commander roared. A thunderous barrage erupted. Missiles, tank shells, and heavy machine gun fire rained down on the statue. Explosions roared in succession, the ground trembled, and thick clouds of dust and debris filled the air. The commander clenched his fists, shouting, "Its structure is pure gold. At this level of heat, it has to melt. It must melt." It was the only hope they clung to, the belief that gold would succumb to fire. But as the smoke cleared, the sight before them froze everyone in place. The Anubis statue still stood. Its black gold body gleamed under the blazing sun, unscathed, unaffected. The only change was the slight tilt of its spear, as if it were asking, "Is that all your strength amounts to?" Then it moved again, this time a little faster. The air thickened, heavy with the stench of death. Some soldiers began to tremble. Others instinctively stepped back. Even the commander, despite his efforts to stay composed, felt a cold sweat run down his spine. Chapter 13. Fire again. The commander's voice thundered like a storm, though deep inside, a nameless dread had already begun to stir within him. Inside the tanks, the crews and gunners immediately began the reloading process. Each reload took nearly a full minute, an eternity given that the enemy was now less than 100 meters away. The clash of metal, the shouts of urgency echoed across the desert, a frantic fever amidst the encroaching death. The statue of Anubis continued its slow advance, its pitch-black eyes seemingly piercing through steel armor, staring directly into the souls of each soldier. No one could stand still. Some instinctively began to step back. Even the commander, who had maintained his stern composure until now, started to retreat, step by step, then turning fully to run toward the command vehicle. Clambering inside, he shouted to the driver, "Drive. Full speed." The command vehicle sped off through a cloud of dust, leaving behind the soldiers still desperately aiming and firing. Fire. The signal was given. Another barrage of artillery exploded. Sand whipped into cyclones, and blinding flashes filled the sky as shells struck the earth, erupting into towering columns of fire. But Anubis stepped out. From within the firestorm, it emerged like an immortal god, unscathed, unsinged, unfazed. Its spear swept out, a wide arc like a giant blade slicing through space itself. Nearby armored vehicles were flung like toys, tossed skyward, and then slammed back to the ground. Inside them, soldiers screamed in panic, scrambling to escape in vain. A tank took a direct hit. The hull split open. One surviving soldier inside managed to crawl through the gash. But as he emerged, he saw the statue right in front of him. Anubis didn't hesitate. Its massive hand reached out and seized him, lifting him effortlessly into the air. His eyes widened, mouth agape in a silent scream as he felt an icy force coursing through his body. His soul was being pulled out. Slowly. Helplessly. Another soldier who had crawled out of the tank witnessed the scene but dared not turn back. Gunfire erupted behind him, causing his panic to spike. They were shooting at Anubis, and he was right next to it. With no other choice, he bolted, sprinting madly, leaving his captured comrade behind. But that thought, that decision, lasted only an instant. Because Anubis's hand had touched his shoulder, his entire body froze. An invisible force yanked his soul from his flesh. Every memory, every emotion surged at once. He wanted to scream, to beg, but it was already too late. And just then the artillery struck. Flames engulfed both him and Anubis in a ferocious blast. His body burned in an instant, but his soul had already been torn out, unable to escape. Anubis stood amidst the roaring fire, head held high, mouth open, devouring his soul. Its tongue licked its lips once more, a moment of dark pleasure. Then it resumed walking, no faster, no slower, as if time belonged to it, as if the entire world did. The surviving soldiers had seen everything, from the moment the statue touched their comrades, to the soul being ripped out and consumed, and yet that monstrous being remained completely unscathed. There were no orders, no command needed. They turned and fled on their own. The armored vehicles that once symbolized pride were now just moving coffins. Their treads dragged sluggishly through the soft sand, their heavy weight making them sink, slowing them enough that death could catch up with a single step. "Get out! Run on foot!" A shout rang out from a grizzled sergeant, instantly sparking a chain reaction. Soldiers leapt from the vehicles, abandoning heavy weapons, running for their lives across the scorching sand. They threw away helmets, rifles, anything to lighten the load and run faster. Everyone understood now. That thing behind them could not be killed with bullets or bombs. Sweat drenched their backs, their feet stepping on the scorching sand until numbness set in. But no one stopped. No one dared look back. because they could feel the cold radiating from behind, a chill not born of climate or physics, but the sensation of death tightening its grip around their throats with every passing second. A young soldier, unable to bear the pressure, tripped and fell. He scrambled to his feet, shouting, "Help me! Don't leave me behind!" But no one stopped. Their eyes were empty, faces pale as death. Each person could only think of running to survive. Fighting was no longer an option. Victory had vanished from their vocabulary. One misstep, 1 second too slow, death would greet them. Behind them, footsteps thundered like a funeral drum. Anubis was approaching. Not fast, but steady, enough to reach the lagging soldier and lay a hand on him. And with that touch, his soul was pulled out. This time, the Anubis statue did not immediately devour the soul. After extracting the soldier's soul, it opened a small pouch hanging from its side, the texture like animal hide. No one knew where the pouch came from, for it hadn't been there before. It placed the soul inside. From that moment on, it no longer moved slowly. The Anubis statue began to run. Its gait was nothing like a human's. It wasn't clunky like a solid gold sculpture, but fluid like a predator on the hunt. Each leap brought it closer, every touch ripped out another soul in an instant, followed by a piercing scream and a body collapsing onto the blistering sand, eyes wide open, mouth frozen mid-scream. Left hand touched. Right hand opened the pouch. Soul in. Touch again. Insert again. It was collecting. Above, a reconnaissance plane circled, recording the entire scene. In the remote command room, no one spoke a word. The silence was so thick, the electronic beeps of the radar echoed like a metronome of doom. They watched every scene, every moment, as if witnessing a slow-motion nightmare. In less than 30 minutes, they had lost more than a full battalion. Highly trained, heavily armed men, now sprawled lifeless on the desert floor. On the screen, they saw the aircraft launch missiles. Explosions erupted across the golden sand, dirt and dust billowing sky-high. But when the smoke cleared, the statue remained. Untouched, unshaken. It merely lifted its head slightly to glance at the sky, then continued the chase. The aircraft tried firing again, trying to buy time for the fleeing soldiers. But one by one, they were caught. Touch, soul taken, stored in the pouch. Touch, soul taken, stored in the pouch. Like a deadly ritual, rehearsed for millennia. Far away, on a distant dune, the command vehicle sped toward the base. Inside, the commander wiped sweat from his brow, panting heavily. Lucky I ran early," he muttered, without a hint of guilt. He knew, if he'd stayed a moment longer, he would have shared the fate of those men now buried on the blazing sands of the desert.